If you want to know the Dark Angels, you must first understand the weight of the mantle they bear, and no soul in the galaxy carries a heavier burden than the Supreme Grandmaster Azrael. In the dying embers of the 41st millennium, where faith is tested and darkness bleeds into reality, one warrior stands as the last, unwavering sentinel of the chapter's honor. Azrael, the Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels. He is not merely a commander, he is the keeper of secrets, the judge of his brothers, and the hunter of those whose treachery has damned them all. For 10,000 years, the Dark Angels have pursued their ancient betrayers, those of their own legion who turned against the Emperor during the Horus Heresy. While the Imperium knows them as loyal, they alone know the truth. They were not all loyal, and so in secret, they hunt. Azrael has dedicated his entire rule to this mission, believing that only by capturing the fallen and forcing them to repent can the chapter cleanse its soul. Yet the truth is cruel. For the first time in his long life, a question lingers in the silence between battles. A question that threatens to unravel everything Azrael has fought for. What if the Dark Angel's great sin was never the fallen? What if the sin was a lie? And what if the truth is finally coming to them, and that's why the Primarch is back? But before we answer that question, let's let the Sound Alchemist explain the origins of the Supreme Grand Master of the First Legion.
The Dark Angels forswear all past life and allegiances, forgetting the worlds of their birth, forsaking all kinship and former friendships to become the warriors of the chapter. Through long rituals and inculcation into the traditions and teachings of the Dark Angels, each takes on the mantle of a righteous soldier of the Emperor and remembers little of his origins. The same is true of Supreme Grand Master Azrael. If he recalls anything of his childhood, he tells nothing. Yet in the vaults of the rock, there exist ancient records of recruitment, guarded by the chaplains and kept safe by vigil and lock. Here, even the beginnings of a lord of the chapter is as great as Azrael can be found. Though the champions discourage idle rumor and gossip, tales do circulate amongst the battle brethren of the circumstance that brought their commander to the Dark Angels. Azrael's beginnings are a mystery, although rumors persist that he was inducted into the chapter from the tribes of wild headhunters who called themselves the icy Pharaoh world Chimeria home. But he shows none of his forebears' predictions, for all antisocial tendencies is what he has. Before reaching even 13 Terran years old, he was marked for greatness. The trophy stakes outside of the lodge of his family held 24 heads taken by the young fighter in raids and battles, and leadership of the clan was certain for him when he grew older. The Emperor's servants had other plans for the youth that would become Azrael, for Chimeria is a recruiting world of the Dark Angels, and on one of their visits to this planet, the chaplains were drawn to the boy. Along with a handful of other promising candidates, he was taken by the chapter, body and soul tested near the breaking point. Alone amongst those recruited at that time, he passed these tests, meaning that there were no others amongst the chapter who shared any deeper knowledge of his lowly origins. Whatever the truth of his background is, he forswore it, as do all new inductees into the Dark Angels. Once inducted as a novitiate into the 10th Company, the youthful Azrael performed above expectations. As his body was crafted into that of a noble warrior of the Adeptus Astartes, so too was his mind. It was not the physical deeds of the scout that drew attention, though they were as considerable as any Dark Angel, but his surety of purpose and dedication to the teachings of the chapter was astronomical. On Dana Segundas, Azrael was tested. Elements of the 10th, 6th, and 3rd Companies were fighting Eldar pirates that had been preying upon the people of Dana Segundas for decades. Against such swift-moving, elusive foes, the scouts were essential in locating the enemy. One night, 2 weeks into a frustrating campaign that had seen the Eldar avoid open battle, the scouts were lucky enough to locate an active warp gate, one that led to the alien ships hiding in orbit above. The sergeants were ready to communicate their discovery to the force commander when a small group of pirates emerged. Caught unaware, the Eldar were swiftly slain. It was Azrael that realized that the Eldar would soon miss their reconnaissance party and urged the sergeants to lead an attack back through the portal before it was closed. Swayed by the scouts' conviction and recognizing the logic of this plan, the sergeant succeeded to this request. Passing through the portal, the scouts found themselves aboard a pirate ship above the world. They wreaked havoc in the heart of the enemy starship, managing to disable its engines so that a Dark Eldar rapid strike vessel could bring it to battle. Before the ship was destroyed, the scouts were saved by a daring Thunderhawk extraction. On returning to the chapter, Azrael was awarded the first laurel of victory, one of only 6 individuals in 10,000 years to have earned such honor before becoming a full battle brother. By the time Azrael took his titled name and ascended to the ranks of battle brothers, it was thought that he would join the chaplaincy. Such was his knowledge of and aptitude for the lore of the Dark Angels. However, the course of his life was to take a different turn. There are many great deeds performed by every Space Marine, and Azrael was no exception, following his rise to the battle companies of the Dark Angels. Amongst warriors that will fight fearlessly and tirelessly for the cause, capable of feats that would make them heroes amongst the ranks of normal men, it takes a particular kind of Space Marine to earn even higher respect and recognition. For Azrael, this turning point came during the scouring of Truan 6. On a night-shrouded world on the edge of the Truan system, the Third Company responded to the disappearance of an Adeptus Mechanicus outpost. At first they encountered no foe amongst the abandoned habdomes and mine workings, and they discovered no signs of what had happened to more than 500 tech priests and colonists. There were no corpses, and no evidence of battle. The Third Company ventured into the depths. There, in caverns deep beneath the surface, they discovered the remnants of the inhabitants, their decaying remains scattered where they had fallen. Tech adepts and miners locked together in mortal combat with themselves and each other. What had driven them to fall upon each other like wild animals, made itself known to the Space Marines, soon undercame a powerful psychic attack. From the heart of the world, a corrupting siren song permeated the minds of the Dark Angels, demanding obedience and sacrifice, filling the warriors with rampant paranoia. Their souls hardened to such intrusion. The Space Marines did not fall immediately under the spell as had the weak-minded colonists, but the assault was not without consequence. Discipline was failing, and arguments between the battle brothers sparked confrontations and sporadic bouts of violence as the company continued to explore. Their commander, Master Bathius, led his squad at the front, delving ahead into the ancient tunnels, the mines that had unearthed, leaving behind the rest of his command. 12 hours later, all contact was lost. After 2 days, during which the rest of the company came to the verge of open rebellion and fighting, Azrael disobeyed Bathius' last command to evacuate if he did not return, instead gathering about himself such sergeants and battle brothers as seemed least affected by the psychic power. They followed Bathius into the catacombs. Here they found the corpses of the command squad, broken and battered by chainsword and bolt shell. Coming under the scrutiny of the foul creature that resided in the depths, Azrael's command suffered at full force of the psychic assault. Pushing through the waves of demented paranoia that assailed him, Azrael left his companions behind and continued on alone, chanting hymnals and battle prayers to harden his resolve. In a temple-like chamber, he came across the Siren Beast, a bloated warp entity trapped half in real universe and half in the immaterial. Holding true to his faith in the Lion and the Emperor, determined that his loyalty was no other, Azrael confronted the warp creature. While it lashed at the Space Marine with ethereal tentacles, every touch from writhing appendages sending burning psychic pain through him for his disobedience, Azrael slashed and blasted at the creature's material form. Yet no matter how many cuts he made with his combat blade, or how deep the wounds were gouged by his bolter, the warp spawn could not be slain. Fighting through the agony of real wounds and psychic assaults, Azrael realized that the creature's warp self had to be banished. With a handful of melt-bombs taken from the corpses of the command squad, Azrael fought his way to one side of the ancient temple, all the way to the other, withstanding the tormenting lashes while he placed the explosives. There was no way to escape the temple and still detonate the charges, so Azrael resigned himself to his death, and he brought the temple down upon himself and the foe. With the warding stones destroyed, the monster was wrenched back into the warp with a last howl of rage. leaving Azrael alone inside his self-made tomb. Azrael believed his sacrifice to be mortal, but after 3 days, the survivors of the company dug him free. Returning to the Tower of Angels, the warriors of the Third Company demanded with due respect and humility that Azrael be recognized for his efforts. In honor of his mental resolve, he was directly inducted into the Deathwing Knights of the First Company. Azrael has quickly proved himself the most noble and diligent member of the chapter. He rose rapidly through the ranks, distinguishing himself through his heroic performances during many campaigns. Although the extremely secretive nature of the Dark Angels makes Azrael's achievements nearly impossible to trace for several decades, but it is known that he was appointed to the veteran Deathwing Company, and he later served as the master of the Third Company. He continued to distinguish himself, eventually becoming the grandmaster of the Deathwing, and from here he famously led the assault that slew the demon-possessed planetary governor, and he claimed vengeance for the Imperium, before the Order of Exterminatus removed this befouled planet from the heavens. The Supreme Grandmaster of the Dark Angels has secretly chosen his successor from the inner circle of the chapter. When the old incumbent dies, their choice is ceremonially presented with a panoply associated with the rank of Supreme Grandmaster. He is presented with the chapter's 2 most venerated relics as symbols of his office, the Lion Helm and the Sword of Secrets. Here, during the Rock, the Dark Angels' mobile fortress monastery, the venerable weapons are so finely crafted that their razor-sharp edge is not chipped or lost its keenness since it was forged millennia ago. Azrael has also took up the Lion's Wrath, a combi weapon said to have been constructed by the Techno-Magnus Prestor of the Unchallenged in the days following the fall of Caliban. Finally, he has donned the Protector, a finely crafted suit of artificial power armor inlaid with the symbols of his new rank. But most sacred of all, the chapter banners are now given to the new Supreme Grandmaster's care. They are to be borne in battle by a battle brother personally selected by him. Of all these artifacts, they are potent icons for the Dark Angels, each having been passed down through the ages from one incumbent to the next, a weighty reminder to the Supreme Grandmaster and to all under his command the heritage and duty of the Dark Angels. Azrael also sits at the head of the chapter's inner circle, master over even the Grand Masters of the Dark Angels' unforgiven successor chapters by ancient tradition, stretching way back to the time of the second founding. As Supreme Grand Master, Azrael alone is privy to the greatest secret of all, for at the very heart of the rock lies a cell, shielded by a meter upon meter of adamantine armor, and inscribed with the most potent runes of Warden. Within this cell, kept alive for 10 millennia inside a stasis field, languishes the broken man, who was once known as Luthor. During rare moments of lucidity, the link twixt Luthor and the warp is strong, enabling the Dark Angels to use him as an oracle of sorts. Each Supreme Grand Master in turn has tried to extract from the Arch-Heretic a confession of his sins committed against the Lion, to make him repent, but even Azrael has not been able to penetrate Luthor's madness. Luthor just continues to rant and rave, claiming that he has no need of repentance or confession, and for one day Lionel Johnson will return and absolve him of his sins. He claims that this day is close at hand, and that the Lion is already near. This renewed secret crusade had its consequences. More than ever, the Dark Angels must operate in the twilight, between duty to the Imperium and their self-imposed quest to rid the chapter of shame. Despite the travails and turmoil this has brought to their battle brothers, Azrael faces this task undaunted. He knows that a greater honor awaits to be seized if the Dark Angels can expunge the fallen from existence, and he holds this higher truth to be more important than anything else that the chapter might accomplish. For the Dark Angels will be free of shame, and they will become an even more potent weapon for the Emperor. Only through force of will and strong leadership can Azrael steer the hard path to final absolution. On one hand, if the Dark Angels totally forget their oaths of allegiance and their pledges of duty, their quest will be in vain. On the other, to relent now, when the Emperor's enemies have never numbered so many, nor the threats to the Imperium been so grave, is to court a disaster that would see the Dark Angels also destroyed. The burden of the awful truth sits upon the shoulders of all in the inner circle, but none bear it so heavily, nor with such dignity, as Azrael. He alone sees the light that will bring redemption, and he leads a course towards it. Only the Supreme Grandmaster, only Azrael, does not hesitate at the precipice of damnation, but strides boldly along its edge, confident that his honor is sound and his goal noble. If the hunt for the fallen can ever be successful, if the dark angels can ever overcome a shame 10,000 years old, Azrael will see it done. And now we come across the war gear, starting with the Lion's Helm. The Lion's Helm is an artifact of ancient times, taking the form of an angelic winged helmet said to have been worn by the Dark Angel's Primarch, Lionel Johnson, during the days of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. It is now the primary badge of office of the current Supreme Grand Master of the Dark Angels. As with all their heirlooms connected to the mighty Primarch of the Dark Angels, it is attended by the Watchers in the Dark. This helm generates a powerful force field that has protected the Supreme Grand Masters since the days of the Dark Angels. To don the winged helmet is to take up the mantle of the lion and lead the Dark Angels to victory, or to die in an attempt. The Sword of Secrets is a master-crafted power sword of formidable potency, crafted soon after the disappearance of Lionel Johnson. It is the mightiest of the so-called Heavenfall blades. The swords cut from a block of jet black obsidian that struck the rock while in orbit around the pharaoh world of Al-Baradad. The blade of the Sword of Secrets is so incredibly well crafted that it has not chipped nor lost its razor edge since the millennia of bloody use. Only the Supreme Grand Master knows that it is also the device that allows access to the deepest dungeon in the rock. Fitting the blade into a cleft in the wall unlocks the iron gate, leading to a dark tunnel and the rune-protected cell in which the Arch-Heretic Luthor is imprisoned in. The Protector. The Protector is a finely crafted suit of artificial armor that has been faithfully maintained by the chapter's master craftsmen over the long millennia, and it is said to provide even more protection and durability than the usual standard power armor. The Protector is inlaid with somber symbols of the Dark Angels. Its exact age is unknown, but the Protector has been considered a chapter relic since the early years of the 37th millennium, when it is recorded in chapter records that it saved brother Matthias, master of the 5th Company, from a close-range battle cannon shot during the storming of a traitor stronghold on the moon of Seclucius 7. Since those days, this suit of armor regularly turns up in the Master of the Armory's log, where it is praised for its exceptional ability to shrug off the most lethal of blows. And finally, we have the Lion's Wrath. The Lion's Wrath is a master-crafted combi plasma gun. Supreme Grand Master Azrael is the relic's current bearer. This legendary weapon was made by Technomagos Prestor, the Unchallenged, in the days following the fall of Caliban. Upon its elevation, Azrael attended its name to the list of Dark Angel's heroes that have borne it into battle through the ages.
Now in the current era, the Cicatrice Maledictum, the Great Rift, has split the Imperium in half. The Warp Storm has unleashed horrors beyond reckoning, and in their darkness, new truth has come to light. Azrael confronts his oldest foe, Cypher, the enigmatic figure at the heart of the Fallen. Cypher did not flee this time, he surrendered, and with him came knowledge of the forbidden relics capable of warping time itself. Now in a moment of desperate hope, Azrael attempted to use these devices to rewrite history, to undo the Dark Angel's greatest shame. But such power is not easily wielded. The engines shattered, their energy spiraling out of control, scattering the Fallen across time and space. The past was not undone, the wound only deepened. Then, like a ghost from legend, the Lion returned. Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, awoke from his long slumber. Now, to know exactly what happened between the Lion and Azrael, check out the video this Friday that's going to be posted by the Sound Alchemist. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much for listening and learning about Azrael. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. This is Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.